Today I'm going to be teaching you how to perform the king of all exercises known at the bench press. This is the squat. This is a very full, in-depth, lengthy video of me explaining all the small pieces and details of how to properly execute this, because this is a very, very intricate exercise that needs a lot of explanation, and 98% of guys are doing this wrong, and a huge majority of guys telling other people how to squat properly are telling you wrong as well. So get ready for my full in-depth explanation of the squat and how to properly perform it. Check it out. Alright, to get this thing started, we're going to explain what you got to do before you ever make a single squat under weight. First things first, what's your foot stance supposed to look like? You're going to start this by having your feet at about shoulder width apart. Now, you might find it's a little bit more narrow for you to feel totally comfortable, or you might even need it a little bit wider out than that. It all depends on the length of your limbs and your torso and all things like that. So try and find, it's typically right around the shoulder width position. From there, you're going to have your feet cocked outwards at about 30 degrees, not 45, 30 degrees. You don't want them facing completely straight forward. That'll cause complications when you're trying to do your squat. Mostly your quads are going to be in the way of your torso as you try and bend down to bring this thing downwards. Before you actually get into using any weight at all, what I recommend you do is perform 3 solid repetitions with absolutely no weight. As you can see me demonstrating here, I've got that shoulder width stance. My feet are cocked outwards 30 degrees, and I'm coming down into that squat stance. My hands are together, sort of like I'm about to be praying. That's not the purpose. As we get down into a deep squat, and when I say deep, you can see clearly right here what I am doing. I'm getting the crease of my torso right around where the hips are bending, lower than the patella, or just lower than the knee. This is the full depth of a squat, and this is what we're aiming to do. Once I'm down there, I'm hanging down there for about 2 to 3 seconds, and I'm pushing my knees outwards. This is important because a lot of times when guys are squatting, those knees tend to come inwards, and it's going to minimize a lot of the role that the adductors are going to play, the muscles around your groin, and allowing you to squat. So by performing this, you're getting your body a little bit stretched out, your hamstrings and your glutes mostly at the bottom of this motion, and you're instilling in your mind the width with which your knees should be out. Those knees at all times should be directly over the foot, width-wise. You don't want them coming in over the foot or outside over the foot. You need to have the knees directly over top of the feet. Now they can go over the toes, and we'll break into that a little bit more, but what I'm saying here is the knees can't be going too far to the left over the foot or too far to the right over the foot. Okay, next, now we're gonna position the bar on the rack, and this is incredibly important too. You wanna have that bar positioned at about mid-pec level. Anything higher, and you're gonna have to probably lift yourself up or lift the bar up with your toes, which is not very efficient. It's putting yourself in a super unstable position, especially because when you're up there on your toes and you got a heavy amount of weight, you're putting yourself in a great position to get injured. So at mid-pec level, you're gonna come underneath of it. You're gonna have to present a little bit of a squat just to get above the pins, and then you take about 2 to 3 steps backwards. We're not trying to hike back as far as we can. We wanna minimize and reduce the amount of backstepping that we gotta do because we're trying to preserve energy for a heavy, heavy squat. Now, the benefit of having the pins so low is when you're done with a heavy, heavy squat, and you gotta get the bar back up to those pins, when you have to get up on your toes and try and just barely get it up onto those exact pins, you have a huge chance that you're gonna miss it, and if you miss the pins with a heavy squat and you're all by yourself, God forbid, you're gonna likely injure yourself. Actually, I'll guarantee you, you will definitely injure yourself. So make this easy on yourself, have those pins nice and low, mid-pec level, and you're gonna do perfect. When it comes to the grip, you need to always have a thumbs over grip. So your thumbs aren't coming around here, the thumbs are gonna be over top of the bar, alongside your index finger, your middle finger, your ring finger, and your pinky. The purpose of this is so that you can have a nice neutral wrist. When you have this neutral wrist, you're actually gonna prevent your arms from trying to support the weight, because when you get that nice bend in the wrist, and then your elbows have to flare inwards, you're gonna get a lot of pain and discomfort on that inner elbow area, and it's absolutely rough. So avoid that by having the thumbs up over grip, engaging in the nice neutral grip of the wrist. And what you're doing here is actually you're pulling that bar into the meat of your back. Your back is the thing here that's doing all of the work. And where you're positioning this bar is actually in the meat of your back. I'm gonna overlay a little bit of a skeletal example here of directly where it should be. Anything lower and you're having a tough time, for one, unloading the bar and then holding it as well, keep it in the meat of your back and you're gonna do perfectly fine with a nice stable base. Now, continuing with the grip on the bar, you definitely don't want to have a super, super wide grip. You've seen these guys do it a million times before. They've either got their arms all the way out to where the rings are on the end of the bar, just before the plates, or guys are stupid enough to have their hands on the plates. Sure, it looks cool, but when your hands are sliding off on these rotating plates, you're gonna lose the bar and you're gonna definitely injure yourself for a few months. Now, not only those guys, but the guys that have their arms all the way out as far as they possibly can, what's the consequence of that? Well, when you have your arms all the way out here, you're not gonna be able to retract your scapula as effectively, which is really gonna be important because that retracted scapula that's gonna be having all of your rhomboids and your traps and all the upper back muscle groups, that is what's gonna create this layer or this meaty pad that the squat bar is gonna be lying on top of, because it actually creates a very, very good shelf for you to hold the weight onto. When your hands are all the way out there, shelf's gone, and well, you're not gonna have the ability to really control the weight, especially when you have the hands over grip, which is beneficial for keeping that neutral wrist. All right, now we're ready for the movement. How are we gonna execute this? The first thing that you're gonna do is after you've got the bar taken off of the pins, you got the weight on your back, you got the proper grip, your focus is the next important thing, your visual focus. Now, most guys have been taught to look up at the point where the ceiling meets the wall, have this really high cocked up head position, and there couldn't be anything that's gonna be less effective. For one, the amount of discomfort you're gonna feel from that is very, very high. It's not proper, it's gonna teach you to really arch your chest into this as well. Pushing your knees above your toes, or pushing your knees over your toes, and activating a lot of quad, and then reducing the amount of roll that your glutes and your hamstrings are gonna play, and effectively lifting the weight. So what you wanna do is you wanna position your gaze as if, because most gyms, they've got a mirror in front of you or a wall in front of you, as if you were looking 5 to 6 feet away from you at the floor. Your gaze is just gonna be pretty much just, completely straight on as opposed to up here. It's definitely not down there, but it's a little bit facing downwards, but it's definitely not straight. It's about in between that area. I'm just trying to exemplify this because I know in a lot of gyms that mirror takes up a lot of that area for you to look forward and 5 to 6 feet and then look at the ground. So just to give you a general idea, you can see right here the head position. That's what you want to mimic, and that's what's going to allow you to actually get a lot of that posterior chain involvement, mostly from your lower back, which is an area that a lot of guys tend to neglect when they're squatting because they think that's improper form. We will get into that soon. Most important thing you need to do when doing this movement is ensure you are getting full range of motion. Most guys think a full range of motion is the point of their hamstrings breaking parallel, but that's not what we're trying to do. What we need to do is actually get the top of the quads to get to parallel or just below parallel. Meaning the point of your hips where your body starts to crease and fold over, that needs to be lower than your patella or your knee. And that's what's gonna allow you to ensure that you're properly getting full depth. What's the benefit and what's the purpose of full depth? Other than giving you full bragging rights on a heavy squat that's nice and low compared to everybody else, it's what's gonna activate a lot of glute and hamstring activity to help you lift the weight, which is very, very effective. Because when you're not getting quite that low, it's gonna be totally quad dominant. You're not gonna get so much stability from the quads and the glutes and the hamstrings. And also, when you incorporate more muscle groups, guess what? You're gonna be able to lift more weight. And also, you're gonna be getting proper training of both the quads, in addition to the hamstrings and the glutes simultaneously, so you don't develop imbalances, which could cause injury down the road. Now that we've got that all going on, we're gonna begin getting into the bottom portion of our squat. Now, you're not just dropping down. I want you to slowly bring the weight down. By doing so, you're gonna make sure that you have all the muscles that are required for the lift fully engaged. When you don't, you just drop down really quickly. Muscles aren't engaged, and they need to come to a screeching halt at the bottom, which is gonna put you in a position to get injured. And now, when you come down, your knees are actually going to go over your toes ever so slightly. That's just what's gonna be required to get a proper squat in. You can see right here what I mean by that. When your knees don't go over your toes, what's gonna have to happen is your glutes are gonna have to go back really far, and then your lower back's gonna have to compensate by bending over a little bit more, putting you in probably one of the ugliest squatting positions ever. That's really, really gonna put a lot of strain on your lower back, on your knees. So avoid that by having those knees tracked a little bit over top of the toes, bringing those glutes down nice and low, breaking parallel, and then we're ready to roll. So now that we're at the bottom of the motion, I need to explain one of the most important parts about this. Most of the time when you hear somebody telling you how to squat, they say, drive through your feet, drive your feet through the floor, pop the hips out, extend the hips out. That's not gonna give you a good visual representation of what you need to do to properly execute this. Forget all of that. You need to lift through your hips. The best way to do this, and imagine this, is as if somebody was holding a chain just above where your lower back and hip level is at the bottom of the motion. What your goal here is to lift directly straight through the chain. This is gonna allow tons of good quad, glute, hamstring, and as well lower back engagement to properly lift the weight. Because when you're doing a squat, contrary to a lot of popular belief, the lower back back is heavily required if you want to do it effectively and not put too much stress on all of your other lower body muscles, including your glutes, quads, and hamstrings. Let me give you a good example of this. If you were to come up from the bottom of the motion by trying to force your chest up first, which is a huge thing that a lot of guys try and initiate the movement with at the very bottom, this is going to reduce a lot of the role that both your hamstrings and your glutes are going to play, and thus put a lot of the stress on the quads. Okay, next, a good thought process to always go through is to have the bar aligned with your midfoot throughout the whole movement. When you're able to fully understand this and try and apply it, that's when you're going to have a good ability to fully engage your quads, your glutes, your hamstrings, and your posterior chain simultaneously to get an effective squat. You're not really able to do this yourself because most often you don't have a mirror to the side of you, and if you do have a mirror to the side of you and you're trying to do it with some weight and you're trying to do a proper form, you're trying to watch yourself, it's pretty damn tough. Not to mention you got a plate in the way because when you're squatting, the plate's right in eye vision, so you're not even gonna have very good ability to look at a side mirror to try and ensure that that bar is seamlessly in a straight line through mid-foot level from the bottom of the motion all the way to the top. So what you're gonna wanna do is have the help of a friend to kind of guide you and tell you, if that bar is within mid-foot level the whole time. And even when you're trying to execute all of these things, if you have somebody who understands what they're doing with the squatting form, either you can run them through it or they're an experienced coach, this is gonna be the best way to fully understand how to properly execute the squat. Without this, you're gonna have to play a lot of guessing games and go, yeah, I think the bar is about mid-foot level the whole entire time, but you can't really tell because most of the time you just got the mirror facing the front, and even if you do have the one to the side, like I said, the plate's in the way. Now, if you don't have a spotter and you don't have a coach to help you run through this, the main thing you wanna do is you wanna try and feel it. You don't wanna try and see it, especially when performing a squat. Try and feel if that bar is about mid-level. Try to ensure that those knees are going just a bit over the toes. Try and ensure that you're getting below parallel on each and every single one of those repetitions. Feeling the engagement of your glutes, your hamstrings, your quads, your lower back, ensuring that you're not folding your body over too much, ensuring that you're not driving up with your chest, and you're pushing the weight up by thrusting your hips forward as if there was a chain there to go strictly straight up. By feeling the motion and not just trying to see it, you're gonna truly be able to understand this on a whole nother level that you will be able to solidify with you forever, and actually explain to a whole bunch of other people as well to help them out with their squat form. Now, one of the main things that I tend to see guys doing when they're squatting is have this really rounded cat back. I'm trying to demonstrate that right there. Now, the main reason that this tends to happen is because of tight hamstrings. So as a consequence of these tight hamstrings, what tends to happen is their lower back tries to bend over even more than it already is, and just in an effort to get the bar as low as it possibly can, as opposed to trying to get those hips as low as they can. And as a consequence, they get to this point where they can't bend their torso anymore, or they can't bend at the hips anymore, and that's when their back starts to arch just so they can bring it down a little bit, and it's just gruesome. It's brutal. It's going to be painful. You're going to put yourself in a great position to get injured. So you need to prevent this by stretching out the hamstrings prior to actually getting into your squats. Make sure though that these hamstrings are warmed up. You never want to stretch a cold muscle. It can snap. Think about if you pulled a rubber band out of the fridge and you tried to stretch it, the shit would snap. Warm it up properly. Stretch the hamstrings by any variety of a hamstring stretch, whether it be toe touches, some straight leg kicks. Do what you gotta do prior to getting into the squat, and you're gonna have the ability to fully stretch those things out so that you can get nice and low in the squat without your back having to totally round at the bottom to try and compensate for a lack of depth. When you're performing this motion, you wanna think, I'm driving through my heels. Once you do this, you're gonna be able to develop a bunch of stabilization within yourself and center the bar. This is gonna help you with that, keeping the bar over the midfoot the whole time, because this area is gonna be about heel to about midfoot level. That's where you wanna kind of drive from. A lot of guys are pushing from the toes, and as a consequence, their knees go way over the toes. I know I said that your knees can go over the toes, but when you're really driving from the toes, that's when the knees tend to go way over the toes. There's tons of quad activation, and you really neglect the glutes, the hamstrings, and the lower back. So, as a practice to help you learn how to properly drive from the rear of your foot, it's best to practice a few reps with some light weight by lifting your toes up and then performing the squat from there. By doing this about 3 or 4 times before you actually get into the squat, you're gonna be able to get that mind-muscle connection and know exactly where you're trying to drive through the whole time. Do this before every single set of full squats, and you're gonna definitely be able to develop one of the most powerful squatting bases through your feet that you can ever have. Now, breathing. When it comes to lifting your max weight, you do not want to be breathing in as you go down and then breathing out as you come up. If you've ever taken a look at those guys that lifting the heaviest squats in the world, you'll notice they hold their breath, they go They hold their breath, they come down all the way to the bottom, and then they come all the way up to the top, and then once they've gotten to the top, that's when they blow out. By trying to blow all of your air out as you're coming up, you're gonna be losing a lot of that abdominal and lower back and thoracic muscle contraction that you have there, which is really powerful for allowing you to squat a lot of weight. And you're gonna lose that, and you're coming from this very weak core, this very soft core. As a result, you're probably gonna have a very suffering squat that you're not gonna be able to max out quite as high as you would be if you were to hold your breath the entire time. I can explain this until I'm blue in the face, pun intended, but you will not truly understand it until you try to do a fairly heavy squat with one breathing in as you come down, breathing out as you come back up, compared to one where you just hold your breath for each repetition. So inhale before you begin the squat, hold it as you come back up, and then as soon as you fully finish the repetition, blow out. You're gonna be able to lift a ton more weight, and it's gonna be a lot easier to actually perform the squat. All right, now my final thing that I wanna mention, if you're going to be lifting heavy weights, always have a spotter. Not just one, two. One guy on each side, because when you get to that heavier weight, you're gonna have guys that are having a tough time to try and help you get behind you and lift the weight up, and not to mention it kind of looks really stupid. The safest way to do this, have one guy on each side, have them lift the weight simultaneously on each side. Nothing's worse than when one side of the bar tilts and then, it's putting your back in a position to get seriously injured. So make sure they try and do this simultaneously. Start very lightly, gathering the weight, trying to coordinate with themselves mentally to ensure that that bar stays straight. That's very important. Now, if you don't have access to that, like most people don't have two training partners, then definitely use a squat rack. You can see the one I'm using right here is the one we use all the time. If you're gonna do this, make sure that you have the pins low, but low enough to the point where you can just get parallel and not lower than the point where you're gonna have to dump the weight if you're unable to get the repetition and the weight just brings you straight down into the floor and you gotta nosedive into the floor. So have it low, but not too low. There you guys go. That's a very full, in-depth explanation of how to properly form the squat. Super intricate, and I didn't even go into the very detailed, gritty details about how to properly perform this. The length of this video, very long, but it's a very intricate exercise that needs a lot of explanation because a lot of guys are doing this incorrectly. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to give it a like down below, and also be sure to subscribe for weekly workout tips and nutrition tips that you won't want to miss. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.